Good morning, everyone. I'm Dawn Genvy, and I'm a research manager in the Patient and Public Involvement team at NIHR. Welcome to the 14th in our PPI in Action webinar series. Today's presentation is focused on integrating the lived experience and voices of children and young people in weight management research. Before the presentation, I'll run through some quick housekeeping. Next slide, please. Please use the chat functions if you'd like to network with others on the webinar. You can enable captions by clicking on the CC button. Next slide, please. And if you'd like to ask a question, please use the Q&A function by clicking on the Q&A button. You can select to send your question anonymously if you don't want your name displayed with your question. And once you've finished, please remember to click send to submit it. Without further ado, I'm delighted to hand you over to Dr. Catherine Homer.
Right, thanks, Dawn, and thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really grateful to the NIHR team for inviting us to present our collective work for this PPI in Action webinar series. So yeah, I'm Catherine Homer. I'm an Associate Professor at Sheffield Hallam University, and I'm a co-PI on the enhanced evaluation along with Professor Louisa Els from Leeds Beckett University. And we're also joined today by Cass Sharman, who's our magnificent PPI consultant, who has worked with us to develop the original application and the funding, and worked with us alongside the whole journey, and Dr. Lucy Neal from the University of Sheffield, who leads the work with children, young people and families, and has guided the PPI process that we've had with us. So today we're delighted to provide an overview of why and how the voices of young people are so critical in weight management research and the service evaluation. We'll share learning from the NIHR funded evaluation and the enhanced study, which has evaluated the NHS complications from excess weight clinics for children and young people. And we'll include how we set up the enhanced arrows, our lived experience group of diverse young people, and how they've been integral to every step and every stage of the study. We'll discuss some of the practical considerations and learning from our work, and showcase some of the outputs and impacts that have been generated by the arrows. And finally, we'll finish with an introduction to the Obesity Voices Hub. This is a lived experience hub that promotes and supports meaningful integration of lived experience into policy, practice and research. This is based at Leeds Beckett University, and how we hope the arrows will kind of feed into this work as we go on to expand the hub and further represent young people's voices. So, ENHANCE stands for Evaluating the NHS England Complications of Excess Weight Clinics for Children and Young People, and I'll leave you to pick out the capital letters in that title to work out how we develop that acronym. It's a typical research acronym there. It's a £1.5 million project, and it was funded by NIHR, HS&DR. We started in February 2024, and we complete in September this year. So we're in quite a busy phase of bringing everything together and going through the dissemination and impact of the work. The evaluation has been delivered in collaboration by 5 universities, so Sheffield Hallam University, Leeds Beckett, University of Leeds, University of Bristol and University of Sheffield. And we've got 2 partners, hospital trust partners in Leeds and Sheffield Children's. You can see a picture of the research team on there. But most importantly, and why we're here today, we talk about our arrows. And this is a PPI group that you'll hear more about throughout our presentation. But it's over 10 families from South Yorkshire, West Yorkshire, the North East and Bristol, who've all got lived experience of obesity and complications related to obesity, and many of whom have attended the Complications of Excess Weight Clinic. So just to kind of explain what complications of excess weight clinics are. In 2021, NHS England commissioned and funded over 35 clinics. It started with 21 in 2021, and it's gone up to about 38 now. They're spread out all over England. It's a pilot programme, so there isn't one in every area. And the Q clinics aim to take a holistic approach to assessing and treating severe obesity and the linked medical, psychological or social complications. And they work broadly with children and young people aged 2 to 17 years old. Not everyone, as I've mentioned, has got access to a clinic, but we have, through the evaluation, worked with data from all of the clinics. And we're going to share some of this with you today. So the evidence for weight management services for children and young people is quite weak, to be honest. There's not a lot of information out there in terms of what good looks like and the outcomes that the services are having. But the evidence that is there suggests that support should be based on an individual need. It should be long-term and holistic. It's given the potential for widened inequalities, we need to consider cost and accessibility of care across the spectrum. And it needs to be multi-component, multidisciplinary approaches to address the things that you see on there. So the dietary, physical activity, social, psychological and cultural determinants of obesity. And we've tried to include this throughout in our PPI approach as well, in terms of the representation of the families that we've got and kind of hearing more about their experience of addressing and working with weight management services. So this is why PPI is so important, and we've done this through the conception of the idea of the study, and we've integrated it throughout the evaluation. Just to point out, we've put lots of pictures on the slide. These are some of our ARROWS members that have been with us through the journey, and to kind of give you a reflection of some of the work and activities that we've done with them along the way. It's certainly not been desk-based exercise all the time. So in terms of it enhanced, that we have got a number of research questions, but they are broadly set out to cover 4 areas. How do the different Q services work across England? Because you've seen that spread and they're all delivered as it's a pilot very differently. What are the experiences of young people and families from different backgrounds who attend the services? Which parts of the Q services make the biggest improvements to children and young people's lives, bearing in mind they're delivered by a multidisciplinary team, and each multidisciplinary team may comprise of different roles. So we're wanting to understand what, where the impacts are and what children, young people and families value from that support. And finally, are the Q services providing good value for money to the NHS? In terms of our project team, I mentioned the different universities and hospital trusts that are working with us. So we've got a big team here. But just to point out this row that I've just circled here, this is our our PPI, ARROWS group. And we put this slide in here just to kind of show that their work spreads across all the different work packages, whether that's looking at the design of the clinics, whether it's looking at experience or cost effectiveness, they are embedded in and have been involved in each part of the process. And finally, just before I hand over to Kath, we just wanted to share this slide with you. So you'll hear more about the process and detail of the engagement of PPI through the study. But kind of here we wanted to share in the early days of our PPI, we used a diagram developed by the ARC West public contributor, Louise Pitting, and the Young People's Action Group to sense check how we were working with PPI. We've kind of kept going back to this to address any gaps, to make sure that we're involved in them throughout the process, and we'll share some of the tools in which we've done this as well. But this diagram on here explains the different ways in which young people can get involved in research and includes the ways in which the enhancers met these recommend areas. So from the development of ideas stage and research proposal, accessing funding, being brave enough to ask for funding, for PPI, for things like an outdoor education residential, we've done that within the bid. We've kind of use this process to help us look at how we're ensuring our ideas are relevant and deliverable to the evaluation, to the funder, to our MDT colleagues and our PPI group. Just before I hand over, I mean, throughout the process, it's been a fantastic experience working with this group. We've had lots of laughs, we've had some tears, we've genuinely learned so much, and I think it's a benchmark of how PPIE and children and young people can be like. So I'm going to hand over to Kath now. Kath will provide an overview of a professional journey, how this has led us to the approach that we've used in the evaluation. And I think to say, if we could clone Kath into every research project, we would. Her knowledge and experience and kindness has been a measurable asset to the project, and I'm sure you'll agree when you hear these next few slides. Here you go, Kath.
Let's hope I can meet expectations, and it's a great privilege to be talking to people today about my experiences as well. So just to sort of give you an idea of my career pathway, started as a nurse, it feels like with Florence Nightingale in 1972, way back. And then in 1986, I moved into university, Sheffield University, and became a nurse tutor, teaching psychology and communication skills. In 1995, I took a bit of a career change. I did a master's degree in counselling and psychotherapy, and from there became a child and adolescent therapist and worked alongside a lot of schools with the British Association for Counselling and Psychotherapy to try and get counselling services established within school services. At that time, a lot of the young people that were being referred to me with low self-esteem, low confidence, body image issues, were weight related. And the Education Action Zone head, called Margaret Booth, at that time said, why don't you run some courses for these young people and pull them together? And in 2003, I started a program called SHINE. It stands for Self-Help, Independence, Nutrition and Exercise. And my first impression, because at that time I was 24 stone, I was sort of saying to the head, how on earth can I run courses for young people with weight issues when I've got weight issues myself? She said, they will relate to you, Kath, you will develop a great sense of empathy. So I took the plunge, and in Sheffield we had 2 very deprived schools. We took 10 young people from each school and ran the first 12-week programme. It's a holistic programme. Right back in 2003, we developed a compassionate approach, looking not just at physical activity and nutrition, but looking at the mental health and well-being of the young people that we served as well. At the end of that 12 weeks, we did an evaluation, and I asked the young people how they found it. Incredibly, all 10 from both sides had completed the full 12-week programme, even when they hadn't been in school. So it was an after-school club, and they'd come to us in the evening just to get support on the programme. When I asked them how they had found it, and excuse the crudity, they said, Kath, it was crap. So I thought, right, so what's kept these young people on the courses when we weren't fulfilling a need, I thought, but the need that we were filling was their emotional and wellbeing support. So from that point, we set up a young person's management committee. I guess that was the very first PPIE that we'd invented from there, and we linked with local MPs and started campaigning. Next slide. Yeah. So the young people became very proactive. We linked with MP Paul Blomfield in Sheffield. He got us access into Parliament. We went to visit Joe Churchill, who was the health minister at that point. We became an ambassador for Pride of Britain. We've done 2 documentaries. One we've got one way back, which wasn't a very nice title. It was called Too Fat, Too Young. And then we did a more recent one. People may have seen the Panorama about obesity, Who Cares If I'm Bigger? And that took a much more compassionate approach. Next one, please, Carl. From September 2019, things progressed really quickly. So I've mentioned Joe Churchill. After the meeting with Joe, she took us to meet the policy advisory group, and the young people shared their experiences and life stories. We also met with the policy advisors, and the young people were saying that there was a lot of their needs that weren't being met. And again, particularly mental health really sort of shone out as an area of neglect. We met with the ambassadors there. The young people told their stories, and then in 2019 COVID happened and everything became at a standstill. Next one, Kath, please. In 2021, we were approached by Emma Rigby, a wonderful woman that was doing 2 pilot studies. It's called the Delphi study, the Association for Young People and Health. They're worth a read. I've put the links on there. One was looking at the initial one. The first one was looking at lived experiences of young people and what they needed. And the second one was looking at the very early intervention stages of the Q clinics and what their experiences were, what was working, what wasn't working. So the links are on there if anybody would like to read after. In 2021, with the help of Sophie Salty, we were actually asked to join a partnership with the South Yorkshire Integrated Care Board and the Sheffield Children's Hospital Q Clinic. And that area involved Barnsley, Sheffield, Rotherham and Doncaster. And so we integrated the SHINE programme across the South Yorkshire area, and we've been running there, and we're still in partnership with the Q team now in Sheffield. We've had over 300 families through. We've got an 82 to 96% retention rate, which we're very proud of. But all our patients are seen within 2 to 12 weeks. That has changed slightly in relation to referral, because what used to happen is the referrals went to the Q clinic. The Q clinics would triage the young people, and then they would send the families to us for our, we do a 12-week, what we call a psychosocial intervention program, which I've just explained, and then we do a 12-week maintenance. About a year ago, that changed slightly because the waiting list for the Q clinic rose quite rapidly once people were becoming aware of it. And there's presently a 6 to 9 month waiting list to be seen. So we get the referrals direct now from the Q clinic, and we keep the young people for 6 months before they access the Q clinic directly. And at that point, they will be involved with a multidisciplinary team. And this is the team, the picture of the team. So there's 3 consultants, there's 2 obesity specialist nurse, there's a dietitian, a psychologist, 2 support workers, and they've recently got a citizens advice worker and their social worker as things have become more demanding. So this is just a pictorial picture you can look at later of our journey, right from 2003 to 2023. And then I was grateful enough, Kath, the next one please, to be asked to be part of the enhanced programme. The ARROW stands for Advocating Responsible Research Opportunities for Wellbeing Services. And we started with a very little group initially, which was called a PPI-1 group. And they were the core of all the things that Kath's been talking about. And Lucy, in a while, is going to give you some of the examples of how we've worked with the ARROWs, including some residentials and things that we've been on. That little group shaped the research. They branded, they looked at the animations, they colour-coded everything. They were absolutely central to every decision that we made at that point. It gradually lengthened to become a PPIE2, and we've extended that to other sites across the country so that we've got a wider sort of input from north and south of England, and that's still in the development processes now. If you're wanting to develop PPIE groups, what I would suggest, first of all, is to really do your background work and to look at the frameworks that are available. There's 2, would you just press again for me, Kath, please? There's 2 validated models, and these are the 2 that we decided to use, and they form the foundation of our developments. The Lundy model on the left, it's really good for sort of structuring how you're going to move forward. It's got 4 domains. It's worth looking at that before you start to engage any young people. SPACE stands for the safety of your organisation. What are you going to have in place in relation to decision making, risk assessment, safeguarding? How are you going to set it up? And giving the sort of the group agreements for how that's going to look and how you're going to support the young people that you're going to recruit to the services. The voice is to make sure that their voice is really heard. A lot of PPIE groups, and please forgive me, it's a bit of a stereotype, but some of them are quite tokenistic. It's a box that's ticked, but they're not integrally involved in any of the work. So it's really important that their voices are validated, and more importantly, that the things that they share, their lived experiences, are integrated into the research process and are acted upon. And that's really important in relation to looking at impact. The influence, our PPI group have had a massive influence on how we've developed whole strategies across our research programme. They need to know who the audience is going to be, who, what, where, how, why, all those questions sort of filtered through before you start pulling everything together on there. And then importantly, in relation to the audience, how are we going to get their voice out there and heard, and how is it going to be shared? How is it going to be disseminated? So we've got all sorts of things like they will review some of the articles that are being written, they're presenting at conferences, you know, they again are a really valued and valid part of our sharing of experiences. The right-hand model, which is Rogers Heart Ladder, it can be used as a initiation tool, but it can also be used as an evaluation tool, which we've tended to use it as we've progressed. It starts from a minimalistic input point of view right at the beginning, in rung 1, and it gradually moves up into the intensity involvement, where the last one is where they actually own the ladder 8 is they own the research process and they lead the other people. We've not actually got to that stage, but on our last evaluation we are on rung 7, which we're very proud of, and that's thanks to all the research team as well. And we believe that our young people feel really valued and respected. Next one, please. On there. So once you've done all the background work, you've got your models and structures and frameworks in place, it's then important to take part in the recruitment process. And again, our young people develop the posters, they put their some examples of their lived experiences to try and encourage passion and initiate new recruitments. We initially started, like I said, in Leeds, Bristol, and then that extended to Newcastle, Plymouth and Leicester. And the most important thing is about consent and Gillick competence. So I don't know if people are familiar with Gillick competence. It's a model where you can assess eligibility for young people making their own informed decisions and acting autonomously. So some of our young people didn't want parents involved and some people did. And that's the tool that we use to assess that possibility. Confidentiality is really important, and particularly in relation to safeguarding, because our young people need to know that what they tell us is confidential. We always check whether it's okay to share their experiences with others, but there may be things that arise that are involved in a safeguarding issue, and they need to know that we've got a duty of care, that if anything arises, we have to sort of share that with their permission and take action. So that's really important, to make sure that they're aware of that. We want them to have fun. You know, the slides that Cass been showing, some that Lucy's going to show, we've had lots of fun. And like Cass said, we've had lots of tears and lots of challenges as well. It's been an amazing sort of journey we've been on. And I think my tip is to get to know each person, whether it be parent or young person, as an individual, find out what their backdrop is, you know, what their hobbies are, what their fears are, pronouns that they like, and most importantly, we found it really an interesting thing to look at their learning style. Next slide, please, Kath. So what we did is we conducted a VARC questionnaire. If you want to do your own VARC analysis, there's a little connection on the bottom. You can click on it. It's just a simple survey questionnaire that you can fill in. And we sent that out to the staff, our families, the parents and children. And these were the results that came back, which greatly influenced how we worked with our young people and how we disseminated information to them without it being overwhelming. So the 4 areas are visual, so people learn by looking. Interestingly, this doesn't mean that you are only use one learning style. These are the dominant learning style on there. So no one had a dominant learning style for visual. Auditory is where you learn and take things on board by listening on there. So again, our young people are a little bit higher than our staff. The read-write one was quite interesting because that was very low in our children and young people. So when we're sending them emails, we made sure that they were very short and very succinct, not lots of messages. When we were sending them articles to sort of co-read and to give out their comment, we sent them to the rewrite people because we knew that they could sort of take on board that role and that task. Predominantly, most of our young people and our staff were kinesthetic, and that means learning by doing, by being involved. So that's workshops, creativity, classes, and that's why the residential was designed, and it was very interactive. Next one, please, Kat. These are just some examples of how we addressed each of those learning styles. So visuals, we've done a lot of animation. We've worked with Nifty Fox, and Lucy's going to tell you more about Nifty Fox and the work that we did with them, very visual. We recorded sessions so that people could listen back to them and podcasts. The read-write one, co-authorship, proofreading, and then the kinesthetic, all the creative work and the designs. And the away day and the residential, which again, Lucy's going to fill in on that in a little while. So what works? This client person-centered approach is developing trust. Can you click them all on for me, please, Kath? Yeah. It's holding the family in a safe and secure place where they feel that they have got enough confidence to share what are often very difficult and traumatic in some cases journeys that they've been on. So we need to know that they are well cared for and well protected. That needs to build up trust, maintain that confidentiality, keep safeguarding in place, and to always check on their mental health and well-being. When they're sharing their stories, we always debrief afterwards, because a lot of them are quite sensitive stories. And once they relive an experience, what we find is that that can trigger that experience back again. So it's really important that we look after that mental health side of it. So for me, my challenges is I've got imposter syndrome. So I'm not a researcher. I'm not a doctor of philosophy. I'm me with a passion for working with young people. I love the job, and I feel privileged to have worked with the Enhanced team. I've learned so much from the researchers and the young people. Communication is really important. So very early on, we did a lot of training with the research staff. I did communication training. We did how to develop groups, how to manage conflicts. We did something called transaction analysis, which is a communication model for working with children at a deeper level. We did, in relation to the training, my role has been, and Lucy's, because Lucy's the co-lead that's been working on the PPIE, it's really time consuming, and I think it's really important for researchers to sort of, bear that in mind. Contacting families, briefing them before sessions, debriefing them after, checking that they're okay. Are they still interested? How do we keep them engaged? Because this has been a 3-year project. We've been very lucky to keep the majority of our young people for the whole of that journey. We don't want them to lose interest. I keep going on about mental health, but for me, because of my background, that's really important. And I would recommend that any team would have some sort of mental health person that can sort of take the lead on that and look after and support our young people with their emotional well-being. And then just to make sure that their work is acknowledged, it's valued, and that they have an impact. And we have regular meetings with our young people to ensure that they get that information. And then just to give a token of appreciation with certificates and vouchers on there. So I think that's my last slide. This on here. My experiences, we spent years and years and years developing services that we think children and young people need. And it's been quite a learning curve to take a step back and say, we get that wrong. Many times we get that wrong. So what we need to remember is that the same condition does not affect each young people. Every single person is different, and also their coping mechanisms and how they manage that condition. So all we have to do is ask them what they need. And the young people at Shine, they developed a little short video, and it was called Walk in My Shoes. So please don't patronise me with Eat Less and Exercise More. Walk in my shoes and then tell me what you think. We haven't got the time to show that, but there's a click on there when you get the slides. Please feel free to take a look. It is quite emotive, but it's a very powerful tool to look at. Yeah. And now, guys, Lucy. So Lucy's the nutritionist, and she's been a great support to me, and she's one of the co-PPI leads on the Enhanced programme. Thank you, Lucy.
Brilliant, thanks, Kath. Yeah, so as Kath said, I'm a dietitian and nutritionist by background, and I've been working on the children and young people's work package, where we've been looking at the qualitative experiences of children, young people and families, and also doing quite a lot of work on the patient public involvement as well with the arrows. And the arrows, as you'll have heard already, have been really pivotal the whole way through this project. And they've done loads and loads of different activities with us. And we've had to think in terms of their learning styles and in terms of what's going to kind of engage children and young people in a way that we might not have had to think about before, and particularly to keep them engaged over that 3-year period of the project as well. So they've been really pivotal, and I think they've felt really valued, and they've attended planning meetings before we came to write the enhanced bid. So they were involved and they understand what the project was going to look like, and they'd thought about some of what that would mean in terms of their lived experience. And then when when we were successful with the funding, we were then able to bring them in and start to build our patient and public involvement group. And we did put a significant amount of funding aside for patient and public involvement. And so they began working with Nifty Fox, who is a creative scribe organisation. And they helped us within the sessions where we just had initially our Sheffield-based PPI group to design logos, to think about the branding, to start to build team cohesion, and to think about what the group rules might be and what we wanted that to look and feel like. And so that was really important because then they had a bit of a foundation, and they helped us to design resources and to recruit a kind of representative sample of the patient public involvement families who'd access Q services more nationally. So we've already shared before, like the recruitment poster that they designed and all of those kinds of things. And so they really wanted their voices to be heard as part of that recruitment process. And so we let them design the poster and sent that out, and then we facilitated obviously some of that dissemination. Once we'd got our representative sample, our national sample of our patient public involvement, and there we are, PPI 1 group, we provided a residential weekend for them. And this was really innovative and really different because it just meant that children and young people from our 3 core sites, which were Bristol, Leeds and Sheffield, could come together and they could share some experiences together. They could do some team building. They could really get to know each other. And it was really beneficial to all of us. So in terms of the research team, we were managing to get some research work done and to run some workshops and to host some events. We had a really good opportunity to understand their own lived experiences and the burden that the families were carrying too, as well as the children and young people. And so the parents found that having a group of other parents who were in a similar situation was also really beneficial. And so we did split up the groups so that there was some that was just with the parents and carers and some just with children and young people, so that people could be honest in front of each other without upsetting or offending kind of other family members. So that residential weekend was a really strong foundation for our team building. And from there on, we were able to do most of our meetings online. So we've had over 15 online meetings. Generally, we've meted every 2 months roughly, but sometimes every 1 month. And we've had little breaks over the summer for when there's been different people kind of coming and going on holiday. We've had to break some of those meeting schedules. And then we've also had another face-to-face event more recently, and that's been to think about the closure of the project and to think about reviewing our creative outputs. Sorry, and to help design some of our resources as well. So thinking about what these outputs might look like. And we've also got PPI members involved in dissemination, so attending our conferences, upcoming conferences in September. Next slide, Kath, please. So we've worked with Nifty Fox and we've worked with our arrows, and we spoke to them to find out, now that they're so close to the end of the project, so this was kind of 18 months, 2 years in, what do young people want people to know about Enhance? What's important for them to get across to people? So they were wanting people to make sure that people knew that there was no judgment within some of these services and that the enhanced services are not there to judge you, they're there to help you. That having a leaflet of information to kind of share stories was really important, that they felt valued and that the researchers were kind of taking action on their ideas, that there was a real really diverse group of people and a sense of community amongst that with the arrows, and that changes were being made and that they were being listened to, and that their voices were heard, and that it had a direct line into improving services in the future. So the arrows have done all sorts of different things, and these colours and fonts and all of the design of the logos and things have all been done by the arrows. So they've designed all of that. They've shared their lived experience in a really useful way, in a really compassionate way. And we've been able to compare, contrast and critique different service provisions. So as we were saying at the beginning, there's been up to 40 services running. And so they've all with very different kind of setup and structures. So they've been able to look at those and think, well, that looks good and that doesn't, and then able to interpret and synthesize data. So wherever we've had a work package that's had some data that's been produced, we've then shown that to the arrows and done the live scribing along at the same time so that we could visualize what that data was. And then at the end of that, we've been able to send it back to the arrows and say, is this what you heard? Is this what you understood from this? Have you learned and do you understand the synthesis of the data? And is there anything we've missed? Is there anything that you think we should have done differently? They've really helped with methodological development and critique and the length of our surveys and some of those things. They've looked at our language and terminology and helped us with lay summaries, and they've currently contributing to lots of research outputs as well. They've developed resources for the website and things like the glossary of terms. And then we've done script writing, blogs and voiceovers for some of our different outputs as well. So in terms of how we should share information, again, we asked the arrows what sort of things they thought would be useful. So they wanted an animation, they wanted something that was short, snappy, focused, that people could see on social media. They wanted real life stories. They wanted something that could go to GPs and to schools and families to try and explain as a very simple document what the service is all about, and to help with the stigma and bullying around that. So they wanted some kind of comics, they wanted some kind of podcast, and they also wanted a poster that could kind of be disseminated and showcased. And really importantly, they wanted to go to Parliament and meet MPs and explain the value of these services. So with that information, we've produced a number of different outputs. So on the left-hand side of your screen, these are the participant information sheets that the arrows helped to draw up. We've got obviously papers and our manuscripts that we've been writing. We've got recruitment materials, and then at the very bottom of your screen there is our first stage of our animation. So this is going to be a kind of overarching animation that shows the benefit of the Q services to children, young people and families. So the key things to consider is that building and maintaining relationships takes time. And when you first set up PPIE groups, it's really important that you just give them space to air whatever it is they'd like to talk about. And that set a really good foundation. We know that these families are carrying huge burdens and quite a lot of guilt around having children and young people with levels of obesity. And so building and maintaining these relationships was really useful because it helped them to open up and share stories. It's important to meet children and young people and families where they are, so the VARC scale was really useful for that. And it's important to slowly build their confidence and increase their responsibilities. So thinking back to the Roger Hart ladder that Kath shared, we've been able to incrementally move them up those rungs. It's really important to plan time for team building and to build trust and rapport. This photo on this slide here is our most recent face-to-face session that we did, where we had lots and lots of information and sharing that we did in workshops. And then we went on a barge cruise and had afternoon tea with the arrows. We need to make the task creative and valuable. Don't meet if you don't need to. They know if you're wasting their time. We know that attrition will happen, and actually the main reason for attrition that we've had in our group is that people were controlling their weight and didn't want to be related to obesity or weight management services. Face-to-face meetings are really useful, and I think it's important to have a couple of these sessions so that people feel like it's a safe shared space. Really making the time to listen, budget appropriately, and develop a shared sense of vocabulary as well, so that we all know that we're talking about the same things. And now over to you, Louisa.
Thanks, Lucy. That's fantastic. So I'm Louisa Els. I have the great pleasure of co-directing the Obesity Institute and co-leading our Obesity Voices Hub with our fantastic lived experience lead, Ken Clare. So I just want to spend the next 5 minutes just reflecting on how we hope the enhanced arrows will help further raise the voices of young people through our Obesity Voices Hub. So next slide, please, Kath. So I thought it might be a useful starting point just to reflect on why PPIE is so important to the Obesity Institute. So for us, it is really critical as it helps us to ensure the work we do meets the needs of the public, communities and patients that we serve. It enables us to take a person-centred approach that is equitable and inclusive by incorporating the voices of all populations, not just those that are frequently heard. It is pivotal to ensuring our research is acceptable, appropriate and relevant to our research participants, and that our findings are made useful to the public and patients. Importantly, it also provides an opportunity for our students to learn from lived experience, therefore really helping us to develop a new generation of compassionate, person-centred healthcare professionals. Next slide, please. Therefore, our PPIE vision is to ensure that PPIE is central to absolutely everything we do, that our PPIE members are our partners and team members and reflect the voices of the communities our research serves. This has enabled us to ensure that people living with or at risk of obesity from across our broad and diverse communities are able to co-design and co-produce all the research that we undertake. Driven by our ethos to demonstrate care, compassion, collaboration, equality and inclusion, with the person at the centre of everything we do, we will always use person-first language in all of our communications, and we will continue to work to eliminate weight stigma and bias. So to achieve this, we set up the first national lived experience hub for obesity, the Obesity Voices Hub. Next slide. So we set up this hub to develop a PPIE community representing members from across our broad and diverse communities who will be given opportunities for development, mentorship and support to promote and advocate for good PPIE practice and meaningful engagement, not just in our work, but for anybody who engages with our members. We are therefore offering free training opportunities for other researchers and signposting and linking to other good PPIE resources and practice. Next slide, please. So this is our hub to date. We have over 300 active members, and anyone with lived experience of obesity can become one of our members and join the hub. Also, any non-commercial research, policymaker or practitioner is very welcome to work with our hub members. We have a growing list of free resources that include a welcome guide, a code of conduct that we ask all of our members and researchers to adhere to. We've got training films, blogs, and a compassionate media library. We really do live by the mantra, nothing about us without us. And excitingly, our next step is to work with the Arrows to co-develop a national hub that really represents the voices of young people living with obesity, which will be part of the Obesity Voices family, but under a different name, very much at the request of our young people. So next slide, please. So I thought I would finish by providing a bit of a call to action from our learning. So firstly, our first call is for NIHR to really think about, can we start to consider how we can include young people as PPIE members of our research teams beyond just being named on research plans? For example, can they actually be official PPIE co-applicants and actually named on the NIHR system? And to be able to do this without creating any digital inequalities. For research teams, our ask would be to engage with families before a call comes out, because building trust takes time. To work with trusted organisations to help with recruitment, to understand the learning and communication styles of our families, and to tailor your engagement and communication mechanisms to these needs. To ensure that all safeguarding and governance processes are firmly in place. And importantly, and going back to Kath's point, so important to ensure that that psychological support is in place. So many of our young people and families may have experienced trauma. Therefore, it's really important to ensure everything you do is not triggering and to have appropriate support in place just in case. Also be mindful that many families do have really complex lives, and it's really important that we flex around these and accept that perhaps attendance may be variable. Involve young people and families in every stage of the work. As hopefully we've been able to demonstrate today, this really is possible. You just need to think creatively. And finally, regular feedback is so important and in that style that meets our young people's needs. So in summary, Good engagement isn't easy. It takes time, it takes patience and preparation, but the impact is so worth so much more than the effort you put in, and it is absolutely super rewarding. Thank you. So I think we've just popped up a few resources, and we'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you everyone for a brilliant presentation. That was so informative. I've got a couple of questions here in the Q&A. So the first one is, do you know of a similar study that helps those at the other end of the weight spectrum? Weight management is an issue that includes those who are underweight too, but you use the term with the assumption it only affects those overweight. What is interesting is that a personalised long-term approach is also best, but there is no provision and no funding. So I think the question there is about the other end of the spectrum, really. Do you know of any other studies?
I personally don't know of any other study. I do agree with your frustration. One of the areas we're very interested in is disordered eating behaviours and eating disorders, and that can span across the weight spectrum. So I agree, it's a super important area, but because I don't tend to work in that area, I'm not familiar. So that's not to say that there isn't any, but it's not an area I'm familiar with. I don't know whether anyone else is familiar.
No, what I would say, suggest is that you can go onto the NIHR funding and awards pages and do a search as well for any similar studies in that area. That will come up then if you search for that. Next question. I really love the innovative idea of a residential weekend for bonding and working on materials. Really supports trust building and open communication. Could you please elaborate on how this idea came to being? Did the Arrows highlight they would like to do something like this, or was this a concept that was pitched to them and they built upon it? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So the residential or some kind of team building exercise was always built in from the get-go. So that was something that we'd discussed with the PPIE group prior to writing the bid. And then it was something that the Arrows then started to develop. So we gave them loads of different ideas. We'd got lots of research that we'd done about different types of residentials we could do. So we thought about going to the National Space Centre. We thought about going to Birmingham. We were looking at things that were fairly central because we'd got such a diverse range of geographical spread amongst people. And we gave them lots of ideas and asked them to contribute their own ideas. And eventually they settled on doing an outdoor activity weekend. And that was held, it was actually a brilliant location. So we'd got dormitories, we were able to sleep in small or larger rooms depending on the preference of the children and young people. Some wanted to bring their families, some wanted to come alone. And then we were able to look at what activities were appropriate for those children and give them a list of the different activities that we could do over that weekend, and they were then able to select the ones that they wanted to do. And they helped to kind of design the schedule and what that might look like, and we proposed that back to them and they reflected on it. So it was something that we felt really passionately was important in the research. But then with that kind of nugget of an idea, the PPIE group really kind of took it and were able to use all of the research and intelligence that we'd gathered to decide what was a useful activity for them and where they'd like to go. And it was really, the biggest challenge really was the spread of ages that we had in the PPIE group and trying to find something that would engage everybody. But all of them ended up doing activities that they'd never done before. And so it was a really nice level playing field. And I think that was really important, that it wasn't a football match or something. It was something that was a real level playing field. So they were doing archery and they were doing lots of different activities.
I think just to add to that as well, I think when we were designing and applying for the money in the first place, we recognised that the PPI group that we got was Sheffield based because we connected through Shine, and we wanted to expand that if we were successful in receiving the money to kind of get representation nationally. And that it's really hard to connect people. And we were doing lots of meetings online and that they'd never see them, and some young people didn't want to even turn the cameras on. So this was an opportunity to bring them together. And I think quite a bit of the feedback we had was really from parents as well, was saying that they didn't realise that they were the only ones in this situation, and they found kind of this experience of talking to each other, talking to families was really, really helpful. So I think there was a lot of things that came out of the residential, not only for the research team, but for the families in terms of confidence and connections. And that bond has carried them through, because they still joke about it in team meetings. So doing something like that early on in the research journey has been really, really important. And of course, they asked to do something again at the end, which is why we went on the barge that Lucy spoke about as well.
I was just going to say something, Kath, about staff, because it takes a lot of planning, but it takes a lot of implementing. And a lot of our young people are really vulnerable. So you were on tender hooks all the time. The safeguarding aspect was really important. The risk assessments are essential. But we were drained afterwards. And then some people, because it was over a weekend, went straight back to work. So I think it's important to look after yourself as well as looking and caring for other people. Yeah.
That was great. Thank you, everybody. The next question is, studies in this space focus heavily on BMI as a success metric, and funding is tied to this. What other success metrics for interventions would you advise measuring, including, of course, experience measures?
So we've not set we're evaluating an NHS Commission service, and that's been the slide that Kath shared around the Delphi study, that helped to design the minimum data set that NHS England have wanted to collect from services. So our role has been about going in and evaluating, looking at the data that they've collected. The way that we've kind of explored what else is going on is through a work package support, talking to children, young people and families, and that's been done, like Lucy's led, through surveys, interviews and focus groups. And that's where we've explored what else could how else could these services be measured? And that's all in our kind of findings that are going back into NHS England to hopefully inform the next iteration of the minimum data set.
And I think what
Brilliant.
we have found is, it has been really helpful to look at those kind of wider determinants, things like quality of life, experiences at school, and as Kath said, to ask young people what outcomes are important to them, alongside, BMI, weight status and comorbidity management.
Yeah, definitely. The children and young people and families have said to us that they just want to be healthy, and they want to be able to play with their friends, and they want to be able to kind of keep up with education and activity. So they're the things that are really important to them, and the measures that they want to have like built into these outcomes. Their weight is like an aside to that, like the weight is a facilitator of doing those endpoints. So for them, it's about like how are they engaging with society and with their peers. And so that's, I think, one of the key like metrics that we still probably haven't got a really good measure for, but it's definitely something that we would like to see built into some of this, so that it's not just a clinical measure, but it's a kind of outcome measure that's around quality of life and that's really important to those families.
And I think somebody mentioned about stigma as well, and that's something that we've found. A lot of our young people have reported stigmatizing experiences across society, very sadly, but also at school. So as an aside, we've also undertaken some work with a group of young people to co-design a primary school short animation to try and address weight-related stigma and bullying in primary schools. And again, that's on the LBU website. I can put a link to it. That's a free resource with a PHSC aligned teaching resource kit, and Kath was heavily involved with that. And we're also now working with some older young people to create a social movement around improving weight stigma and sort of promoting self-compassion in our sort of older adolescents. So there's so much sort of spin-off work coming from this to try and address these wider societal impacts.
I was going to say as well, Louise, when you mentioned school, that's been a really strong emerging theme that's come up all the time, and the difficult situations that our young people have been in school, uniforms, bullying, PE sessions, long timetables when they're exhausted, and hopefully that's gone to the Department of Education. Particularly about parents being fined for children being out of school for hospital appointments and things like that. So that has been a really big, really on an emerging theme, if you like, that we'd not considered before.
Brilliant. Thank you, everybody. In your experience, what is a good group size and age range to keep it personal to develop good relationships while making sure it reflects a representative group of diverse people?
Kath, do you want to chime in on this one?
Yeah, I think it's not really an age-related thing, because we've got some 10-year-olds that are absolutely on the ball, and 15-year-olds that may be a little bit less confident. And there was a question in the thing about neurodisability as well. So it's the background of the children, including neurodisability. But we've worked with children at Shine from 8 to 16 and had them in the same room, and they've been really compatible. I think it's more about the techniques and the skills of working with the groups rather than having selected age groups or a selected, it's just be inclusive, because you can work around everybody's learning style. Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant.
Also,
Thank you.
Sorry, just the role, just by having Kath in as this kind of independent person that's outside of the research team as well, to have those connections with people, I think it's helped to make people feel heard. So, and when we've done Zoom meetings or Teams meetings, some people sit really quiet and keep the cameras off, but as we've built a relationship with them, and primarily Kath, we've just prompted them and said, like, what do you think about this? Do you want to add anything, or do you want to pop any comments in the chat, or send us emails afterwards? So there's different ways to engage people to have that voice. So I don't think there is an optimal number, and because of the attrition thing as well, where you do get people phasing off of this, but it's more down to the trust, relationships, building confidence, and allowing different ways for people to share their opinions. I think that's probably more important than focusing on a number with something like this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Thanks for a great presentations. Do you have any tips for early career researchers keen to get PPIE embedded in their work, but with limited funds or contacts? I'll definitely be looking at the Obesity's Voices Hub as a starting point. So,
Don't know who wants
any
to
tips?
chime in. Yeah, I mean, please do get in contact with us. I would say, as an ECR, try and find friendly researchers working in the field that will hopefully sort of help link into sort of their networks and pass on their experience. And certainly anybody within our team would be very happy to help you, because we are just super keen to see the voices of lived experience meaningfully engaged in paediatric research. So yeah, please do get in contact, and we will try and support.
And quite often universities have small pots of engagement funding, and that can be really useful to start to just get enough money for some vouchers or some food or whatever it might be to help with the engagement. But there's loads and loads of information on the NIHR website around engagement and the kind of activities that you would pay people for. So once you know what roughly you might need in your budget, that you might be able to find funding through different parts of activity as well.
I guess the other thing is sorry, Dawn, just to be brave in it, because PPIs, it's not a tokenistic role. Whenever we apply for funding now, you have to seriously consider and evidence how you've used PPI in your approach as you're going in for funding. So actually universities should be taking it seriously, and I think there's something about being brave, setting out what you want to do. When we first discussed the residential cast, right, we all went, what are we doing? This is like a crazy idea, but we've done it, and actually it's been the best thing we've done. So there is something about taking a leap of faith, but finding an ally within your university that might have done it in another area. It might not be on obesity, it might be in something completely different, and you can use that as an example, as a precedent. And I think it's challenging whether you're a professor, an associate professor, or an ECR. It's taking people on the journey with you, and I think just keep going with it and don't be put off.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you. Do you know of any training for professionals on conversations about weight that have been informed by lived experience of people living with obesity?
I can say we are in the process of developing some training materials as we speak, so hopefully there should be some available. I know some of the other patient advocacy groups, so we're working with UK CPO, which is UK Coalition of People Living with Obesity, but I think Obesity UK and All About Obesity have some resources around good conversations. So, and I know University of Bath have also produced some fantastic resources about having sensitive weight conversations with children and young people as well. So I'll see if I can dig out the link and pop it in the chat.
Brilliant, thank you. And then we've got another couple of questions here. So my issue has been on how to involve young people in protocol development / writing. Usually we've involved them once we get the funding. So I suppose the question here is, did you involve your young people in that early stage? And if so, how?
Yeah, we did. So we did some through Kath, we did some facilitated conversations, and we did some Saturday morning workshops where we went in and we said, this money's come about, this is what we're thinking, what do you think? And they advised us on, so they didn't get involved with the obviously the writing down of stuff and protocol development, but we asked them, we proposed ideas on the surveys, what the surveys would look like, the length of the surveys, if interviews were appropriate, if it should be online or face to face, and that informed the research proposal that we had to submit at stage 1 and 2 actually. I think we initially went in at stage 1, and then when we got feedback and we refined comments, and they were built into stage 2, and we've just kept going in that way throughout. So yeah, it's back to Louisa's point about engaging PPI groups early before the call comes out, or when you get a notification of the call.
Yeah, that's great, thank you. And last question, how did you evaluate your intervention with the young people, that it worked, i.e. their engagement and involvement? How did you evaluate that?
Kath, do you want to chime in?
I didn't hear the question, sorry.
No, that's okay. So how did you evaluate that your intervention with the young people worked, i.e. how did you evaluate their engagement and involvement?
I think it was from the Hearts ladder that we spoke about earlier, and Lucy said that was a progressional tool. So we were right on the bottom of the rungs of the ladder, asking them what they wanted and how to sort of promote that, and listening to what they wanted. We're actually moved up to step 7. So that is a really good evaluation tool. There was also one that's very typically, what have you liked about your involvement? What have you disliked? What would you change? And there was a score of 1 to 10 on there, and we were in the 9-10 pretty quick on there, so we felt that we met their needs, or they were very good liars.
Yeah. We've also used the Pirit tool as well to capture all of the impact that the arrows have had. And I think we can see that there's like a built-in base of evidence or a built-in base of resource that they've been involved in. And I think our attrition rates as well, they've been really low. So I think that's been like a very, sort of other small marker of engagement and success as well, that people have stayed really engaged with this project and attending all of the meetings. So yeah, we've had some kind of formal and some more informal measures.
Brilliant, thank you everybody. That's all the questions. So next slide, please. Thank you. So thank you everybody for your brilliant presentation today, and thank you to those of you who've attended. I just wanted to signpost you all to an upcoming event on the 22nd of September at 10 o'clock. Further details will be circulated to you all, and an evaluation form will be sent for today's webinar shortly via email, together with the slides and the recording. Thank you everybody.